So there's been a lot of talk right now about the income taxes and taxes in general, even tariffs with the new Trump administration. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about incentives and how that works a little bit. First of all, take a look at taxes, okay? What a country, if you remove the word tax and start talking more about incentive, you'll find out what's important to a country as they tax or incentivize what parts of the economy for the individual. Trump is talking about removing income tax, which is pretty revolutionary, and it would be a great concept, and the government can find sources of revenue elsewhere. Let's take a look at how we currently do it in our system. First, when you look at income tax, income is a tax on productivity. So the person that makes more income pays a bigger tax. And so when you tax income, really what you're taxing is you're disincentivizing people from making more income. Now, I'm a fan of somewhat of a progressive tax system. I'm okay with people that make more, paying more in taxes. That's not what this video is about. But this video is about understanding incentives, because if more people in America understood how we incentivize, then we could vote for politicians and we could vote for the right programs that will incentivize our country to produce the best results. Back to income. So if you produce more or make more and you tax that more, what ends up happening is you disincentivize people from wanting to make more money. You look at sales taxes. Sales tax is a tax on consumption. So if the neighbor of yours wants to buy 5 cars and we have a sales tax, that means the individual will pay more in taxes because they have 5 different cars. Maybe you're sharing a car and you're trying to be responsible and keeping your consumption down, and that would give you less taxes because in sales tax, you're taxing consumption. And so those that consume more pay more, and those that are not consuming more, they pay less. You look at capital and investment. When you hear phrases like capital gains tax, imagine somebody that invests $1 million of their money and then they make $2 million on their money. There's usually a tax on making money. And that also goes back to income on productivity. The higher your capital gains tax is, capital meaning money, gains meaning you made it. If you have high capital gains tax, like sometimes our countries had 25% in capital gains tax. And then what happens is that our companies, they send their productivity overseas because maybe overseas they're going to pay 10% or 15% or no taxes on their productivity. Whether you feel good or not good about how that works, we as a government or our country is incentivizing businesses to either do business in the United States or it's incentivizing businesses to take their business elsewhere because we're taxing them too high. Again, I'm not talking about whether I'm a fan of capital gains tax or not. It's just I want you to understand how incentives work. And so the more capital gains tax you have, or the more you tax people that make money on their money, then the more opportunities and the more they're disincentivized to do it here in the United States, and they'll want to do it somewhere else. If you recall, back in Trump's first presidency, there was a period of time where he allowed people to repatriate their funds back into the United States. And what that meant was that you could bring your offshore accounts back to the United States because Trump understood that people pushed their money overseas because they didn't want to pay taxes here. So he lowered the taxes and gave them the ability to bring their money back here so that the United States could have that productivity. Obviously, you hear things like estate taxes or death taxes. This is terrible, but obviously nobody's there in the end to fight for somebody. If somebody was an elderly person and they didn't structure their investments properly and they passed away, and the government has estate taxes or death taxes, then this individual would have to pay taxes at that point in time. But what we're talking about right now is we're talking about income taxes. And so Trump has been talking a lot about ways to either minimize or completely reduce taxing people on income. The idea is that people would generate so much more income if they weren't paying taxes, and they'd be incentivized to make more and more and more money. And then the productivity increase in the United States would help our country offset the loss of income taxes. Let's use some other areas of incentives in our government. We just had our election, and what were some of the main talking points? Immigration, tariffs, taxes, these were security, these were inflation. These were some of the most talked about issues in our government. Let's look at it from an incentive perspective, okay? Let's take immigration for an example. If you tell somebody that's in another country that if you come to the United States that will give you benefits and that will pay for certain things for you, then you're incentivizing people to come to our country, bypassing the legal immigration process and to do it illegally. Hence, you have a big issue, what we've currently had. So you have to make sure to let people know that there's a process to coming into our country legally and that you incentivize that. You can't incentivize bad behavior, because if you incentivize bad behavior, people will take those bad behavior and they'll cut the line and they'll try to come to our country illegally. That part's being fixed right now. Let's look at how our market works with inflation. Our government has been incentivized to keep interest rates down, printing money, keep the stock market high, because who donates to political parties? Who donates to political parties is people with money, business owners, people that run big organizations. And so you want to incentivize to be able to attract donation dollars and to be able to attract, please your donors. You make sure that they're making money in their housing market or they're making money in their 401ks, but that doesn't always help everybody else. And so guess what happens when you print a lot of money? You have inflation. And so now that we have inflation and it touched everybody, Trump exposed that and said, I'm going to get this under control and fix this. Again, this video isn't about Republicans or Democrats. It's about incentives. We started off by talking about taxes, but when we see what our government did, our government was incentivized to keep certain groups happy. And what that did is that led to inflation. And so we can't print money thinking money's for free, and we can't hand people money. We can't be paying off student loan debt. Listen, I went to college. I got into student loan debt. It's a terrible thing. I didn't like it. Nobody wants to be in debt. Heck, biblically, debt's not even a good thing. However, you can't incentivize until the government is going to pay off. And I know this isn't going to be popular because there's a lot of people probably watching that had the government pay off their student loan debts. I'm not about incentivizing people to get into debt from their own decisions and then having our government and tax dollars remove that debt, because then people would be incentivized to keep getting into debt thinking the government's going to take care of it. That's not the way you want to do it. I'm more incentivized to help the college kids that went to the university, got into debt, graduated, they're living with their parents and they're not getting ahead right now. I'd want to incentivize them to start their own businesses, incentivize them to be productive and to make money so that they could pay off their debts that they had in the past. I didn't like paying off my college loan debts, but I learned a lot in that process that was my decision to make, and that I wanted to make sure that the incentives that I have both from my government to me or the incentives that I have when I run a household or I run a business, you have to make sure that your kids, if you're a parent, you have to make sure that your incentives line up with the behaviors that you'd want your children to do. If you want children to read books, incentivize their allowance with reading. If you want children to do chores, incentivize their allowance with chores, or do things that'll be able to control and dictate the behavior, not by an authoritative position, but by incentivizing people to do this. Heck, Jesus walked the earth and we had the 10 commandments from Moses, and then Jesus gave some steps that he wanted people to evangelize and to grow the church. What's the incentive? Going to heaven. What's the incentive? Living a joyful life. So whether it's your faith, whether it's the government, whether it's your marriage, whether you're a parent, or whether you're running a company, you want to incentivize people the right way. And right now in our government, there's a lot going on in our country right now with incentives, both on the income tax side, which Trump's wanting to get rid of and incentivize us in a different way, but also tariffs. By doing tariffs to other countries, what you're doing is that's disincentivizing other countries from violating our trade agreements and to make sure to balance our trade agreements. I'm not as a free market person, I don't want to see a bunch of tariffs running around, but I understand to incentivize countries to get in line with what they're supposed to do. Sometimes you need to use a tariff as an incentive, hoping that they would get their course correct their behavior, just like the government of the president of Colombia recently did. He said, I don't want anybody coming back, and I don't want United States dropping off any planes into our country with our illegal immigrants. And then Trump said, really? So now we're going to have a 25% tariff on all Colombian goods coming into the country, and in a week it'll change to 50%. What did the Colombian president do? He changed his position because that was disincentivizing him to continue his behavior and incentivizing him to change his behavior. So at the end of the day, taxes, tariffs, inflation, all of it has to do with how we incentivize, and who picks to incentivize this is our elected officials. And that's why us as Americans, we have a choice. And whether you're running your household, your church, your government, we have choices on how we incentivize, and that will dictate human behavior. And on your pathway to being a better leader, a leader for life, we want to go ahead and subscribe to our channel if you like this content. Share it with others, leave a comment, like it, let us know how we could help you be a better leader.